It's social distancing at the chamber. It's a Wednesday night edition. We also call this Happy Hour with Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor, joined as always by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. Hey, Glenn.
Good to see you.
Another day, another edition of Chamber Business News. Today, a lead editorial, unusual, top of the masthead editorial from the boys at CBN. This from our friend Sean McCarthy at the Arizona Tax Research Association. Boy, Glenn, we can go through it, but talk about pouring cold water on the idea that we should have a nearly 80% tax increase.
It's a powerful piece. Sean McCarthy does a great job for ATRA. Makes it very clear. So what do we get for this historically high, I believe the highest ever tax increase in Arizona's history? No accountability, no stability. And, this Portland, Oregon finance scheme is really something else. I'll tell you that.
Glenn, on last night's show, we talked about the lack of predictability and stability when it comes to K-12 budget planning that results from Prop 208. I want to mention this. I want to pull out this excerpt for you, get your reaction to this. Schools justifiably do not want to have their budgets whipsawed. Teachers want stable funding. And this is the point that you've made, Glenn. 208 is a tax on the most volatile portion of the income tax. In fact, in the first full year of the recession, it's the tax source that dropped 32%. Glenn, schools could be in for a wild ride if they hitch their wagon to this.
Well, Garrick, the things that we've worked on, getting the funding for Governor Ducey's plan to increase teacher salaries by 20% over 3 years, that's stable funding. Proposition 123, that's stable funding. Proposition 301, extension for 20 years, that's stable funding. That your comment's exactly right. They're going after the most volatile part of our tax code. That's individual income tax, which covers a lot of things like capital gains, and of course it covers a lot of the small business pass-through entities in our state. And you think about what happened in the financial panic, that we know how volatile that revenue source can be. And here we are in a pandemic. That's the last tax you should pick if you're trying to find a source for stable funding.
If you are a school budget planner and you are planning out your budgets, according to the McCarthy piece, you're going to have your work cut out for you, aren't you? Because planning goes out the window if you're betting on these dollars.
You can't plan on this. And in fact, if we're right, and I know we are right, that this will really harm our small businesses, our entrepreneurial class, if you will. Again, this doesn't affect, once again, they designed it so Apple, $2 trillion market cap, and I'm not complaining. I wouldn't advise to tax big corporations either because so many jobs are associated with this, but they go after small business. They go after the Arizona homegrown businesses. And in doing so, there's zero accountability. There's really no predictability. I just think that this is just, it's so poorly constructed. And it's also very misleading how this is being advertised. There's no accountability to this. It's the largest tax increase in Arizona's history, and it's financed by an entity from Portland, Oregon. So, all of those facts are missing from the ads thus far. Maybe at some point they'll share those facts with voters. We'll see.
Stay tuned, right? Glenn, before we leave this topic, another respected economist, Elliot Pollack, put out a memo earlier this week talking about some of the damage that could be done to the Arizona brand. This is something you talked about in last night's show when you visit with your colleagues from around the country. Elliot writes, the very real risk here is that any bad publicity and image change from this, and unlike previous versions, this would be permanent, could hinder future economic development efforts in the state. The results, lower growth, could offset the increase in revenues projected by the proponents of the act over time. He was, in his piece, Glenn, he talks about the role of economic developers and site selectors and how this rate, this high, it'll jump off the page.
Garrick, we would go from a top 10 state in terms of competitiveness to a top 10 high state. We would be with states like Vermont, like New York, like California. These are not states we want to be with when we're talking about Arizona being such a great competitive state. Yeah, overnight, it destroys the reputation that so many of us have worked for. And again, I just have to make this clear. This hasn't just been a Republican enterprise. You know, we've had, it's Governor Simonton, it's Governor Hull, it's Governor Napolitano, who passed when she was governor a very significant rate reduction, and Governor Brewer and Governor Ducey. This has been part of the operating system for Arizona for over a quarter century. And what has it brought us? It's brought us into being one of the fastest growing states and the state with the fastest growing county, Maricopa County, in the United States of America. It's brought us a lot of good things. Why would we want to wreck that? And why would we want to even risk that when we're in a pandemic? Right. And we know that there's so many human beings and companies looking at new business models. This would be a bad idea at any time. It's like an epically bad idea during a pandemic.
Glenn, last night on Channel 10, our local Fox affiliate here did a story about inbound migration, especially to the Valley. Scottsdale and Chandler, two of the most popular inbound destinations from states like New York and California. I know that you've been screaming about this forever. Now the local news picked up on it. That could all go bye-bye if we rocket into the top 10 of highest tax rates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a living example. I grew up in New York when I was a kid, and I'm not going to go through my whole shtick, you know, too much concentrated orange juice. If you told me at this point in my life, Florida would have more people, but really what's happened is that New York has earned the reputation as a high tax, high regulatory state. So people who have the opportunity to go elsewhere, who are more entrepreneurial, more adventure spirited, look elsewhere. And Arizona has been one of those states that's been attracting all these great people from all over the country and all over the world. And that music would stop on a dime if this were to pass. These are the stakes. And by the way, these aren't, look, people know my, people know I'm a Republican, but there's a lot of Democrats, a lot of party not dependents. I mean, we've all moved into this great state and built it. And we've all, so many of us, 70% of adults have come from somewhere else for the great lifestyle in Arizona, including the responsible taxation that we have. It's not no taxation, it's responsible taxation. Yep. And to wreck it by an outfit that is from out of state, that didn't consult with the leading business groups, the leading education groups, the leading economic development groups, it just isn't right.
Glenn, it sounds like you and Elliot Pollock are singing off the same song sheet, because in his piece he says that competitive tax policy is critical to economic development. But then he goes on to say, this includes reasonable, middle of the road, and what most people would consider equitable tax policies for businesses and individuals. As you said, Glenn, we're looking for responsible tax policy, and this ain't it.
Garrick, it's not it. And we're always looking for that balance. We want tax competitiveness. We want a great education system. We want a great transportation system. We've stepped up to the plate every time, not almost every time since I've been at the chamber, when it has come to the needed extra funding, whether it's boom times in Arizona or bust times for our core functions, education, healthcare being the top two. But we've done so collaboratively. We've done so in a bipartisan way. We've done so with other business and economic development groups. Again, this is just something that is just thrown into the mix without any sort of regard for what it can do to a state that has worked very hard to be in the pole position in the United States of America when it comes to economic development activity.
Right. All right. Well, we will continue to stay on the case, and thanks to the ink-stained fingers over at Chamber of Business News for continuing to get the good news out and shining a spotlight on this thing. Glenn, before we let you go, we are coming up against Labor Day. That traditionally marks the final sprint in campaign season. I just wanted to get your state of the race in the presidential race. I'm not going to ask you to make predictions, but as you look at the playing field, anything jump out at you that maybe is different or maybe even the same from previous presidential cycles?
I just want people who are in the polling business to really think through and double and triple check when they put things out. You know, when I see polls that one side is up by 10 points in Arizona, we've been around the block a few times, Garrick. That's not going to happen. I mean, this is going to be a field goal race in the state of Arizona on the presidential. And it feels to me like after the convention, it's tightened. There's going to be, there's going to be the core issues are going to be the economy, civility in America, making sure that we have security as well. How these all mix out, I'm not quite sure. But I do think that we're going to have a photo finish on the presidential. And I'm not convinced right now we will know on election day, which really now is sort of election month for the country, right, who's going to be in the White House in January.
Glenn,
what do you think?
I agree with all of that. I will keep my prediction to myself, but I'll say that it's going to be close, and on election night, go to bed because you're not going to know. So I'm curious, we didn't get to have you on the show after the vice presidential pick was made by Vice President Biden. Do you think the Harris pick had any material change on the trajectory of the race, or was it fairly conventional and move on to the rest of the campaign?
Well, it was a historic pick. I felt that Vice President Biden has run a smart campaign. It's not an aggressive campaign, but it's a smart one. So I felt that Senator Harris is a good, solid pick. It doesn't scare, if it were someone like Senator Warren, I'd be extremely concerned, and this race would look a lot different than it does today.
I see.
But the fact is the Democratic voters didn't go for Bernie Sanders, thank God, because I think that the risk of that to the whole American enterprise would be very severe, and I wouldn't want to take that chance under any circumstances. So, a Biden-Harris ticket is not going to scare anyone. And I don't believe that President Trump will win re-election trying to scare people with that ticket. I believe his path to victory will be that he can restore the economic prosperity that this country was clearly enjoying before the pandemic struck, and he could do so perhaps in a little bit of a calmer way. So, but that's just my 2 cents. What do you think about the pick?
Fairly conventional, which is strange because you would never think that a pick as historic as you said really probably would not have a dramatic impact on how somebody pulls the lever. Now, I will note, Glenn, that Joe Biden is no spring chicken, so maybe voters will think through this a little bit more. But I think it's a fairly reassuring pick.
Well, and given that I've seen polls, I can't recall if it was just Democrats all Americans, but somewhere around 50% of people don't believe that if Joe Biden were elected president, he would finish the first term. It was a stunning number. So to me, count me in as someone that's going to get the popcorn for the vice presidential debate. The presidential debate, I'm not nearly as interested in as will be the vice presidential debate, because I think a lot of people are going to be tuning into that and trying to assess their comfort level with a President Harris. So to me, that's a little bit of a difference in this presidential race than in the ones, at least in recent memory.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then last question for you, just from a tactical standpoint. This has been, from the Biden side, a mostly front porch campaign. We're starting to see the candidates get out in public a little bit more, albeit on the Biden side without the big rallies. Any thoughts about what campaigning looks like in a pandemic, or if you had any advice for these candidates?
Well, I would say still get out there, but not in big crowds. So travel around the country, do socially distanced roundtables, do some local media from these different localities. I do believe for most places, it is safe to fly in, meet with some community people, meet with some regular voters, do some local media, and move on. I would not spend a campaign either in the White House or in the basement of a home. That's my 2 cents. There's plenty you can do right now. Domestic travel is just fine. I've traveled on an airplane. It's not a big deal. Wear a mask and get out there. That would be my 2 cents.
I think that's right. I think that if you are, as a candidate, if you are demonstrating that you are taking things seriously and you are showing a concerted effort to act responsibly while still going about the business of a candidate, I don't think that voters will punish you for that. Now, arenas full of non-mask wearing people, voters, especially in swing states, they might notice that.
They would notice that. So, be responsible. And if you're responsible, I think, one of the best political book I've ever read was by John Shadeg's dad on how to win an election. There is something to still be said about being physically in a place. And again, it's not, I wouldn't recommend, finding a Scottsdale bar or lounge and packing in a gazillion people with poor circulation while the beer flows. But there's plenty of venues where you could do so safely, and all over the country. And the weather usually is pretty nice across the country and in the post-Labor Day period. And I do think also just psychologically, it's helpful for the country to see its leaders out and about responsibly. We're at a different place, thank God, in most of the country than we were, including Arizona, than we were a few months ago. And I hope that our leaders running for president and their surrogates take that into account. I'd like to see a little bit more circulation, not too much, but a little bit, but certainly a little bit more.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. It's another edition in the books. We will see you on the next show, Glenn. Thanks again.
Thank you.